friends, thank you for being here today. I want you to picture a scenario that defies everything we understand about global power. The world's sole superpower, the undisputed heavyweight champion of military and economic might, loses control of a prize worth $50 trillion. Not in a blaze of gunfire, not through a cyber attack that cripples its infrastructure, but in near total silence. Imagine if the future was decided not in the situation room or on a battlefield, but in hushed conversations in corporate boardrooms in Toronto and Copenhagen, and in the modest government buildings of Nuuk, Greenland. What if I told you that while America was utterly consumed by the 24-hour news cycle, by partisan shouting matches and social media frenzies, its closest neighbor, a nation synonymous with courtesy and compromise, had just executed the most brilliant and bloodless geopolitical coup of our time? This is not a story of weapons, but of warrants, not of invasions, but of investments. The critical resource in this new war wasn't uranium or thorium, but something far more foundational and far more fragile: trust. Beneath the ice, the bedrock of Greenland holds a secret that has rewritten the destiny of nations. $50 trillion. A figure so vast it becomes abstract, meaningless. Let me make it concrete. It is more than the entire annual economic output of the United States. It is the key to the next century. We are talking about rare earth elements, the 17 minerals that make your smartphone smart, that guide precision missiles, that are the lifeblood of every advanced technology from medical imaging to renewable energy. We are talking about lithium for the electric vehicle revolution, cobalt for the batteries that will store the sun and wind's power, gold reserves that would make Fort Knox look like a piggy bank, and uranium deposits that could light up continents. This is not mere wealth. This is strategic, civilization-defining capital. The raw materials will determine who leads and who follows for the next 100 years. And here is the shocking, sobering truth that should send a chill down the spine of every policymaker in Washington. The United States has lost it, all of it. But the victor is not who you'd expect. It is not the rising dragon of China, whose ambitions we watch with hawk-like intensity. It is not the resurgent bear of Russia, whose Arctic militarization we monitor with grim focus. The victor is Canada, a country so peacefully unassuming that its greatest cultural export is an apology. They achieved this staggering feat without a single aircraft carrier, without a single sanctions package, without a single angry tweet. They did it with patience, foresight, and a simple radical idea. Ask, don't tell. The consequences are already rippling through the foundations of American power. Multi-billion-dollar contracts for next-generation fighter jets are stalled on factory floors, their exotic alloys suddenly unavailable. The development of hypersonic weapons has hit a wall, literally a wall of rare earth elements now controlled by a friendly face who is no longer simply taking orders. NASA engineers are in a quiet panic, recalculating missions based on a new alarming scarcity. The leader who once promised the art of the deal has been outmaneuvered by the science of the relationship. This story is a parable for our chaotic age, a stark lesson in how a superpower can be checkmated not with a bang, but with a handshake. The roots of this disaster are a study in contrasting worldviews. When Donald Trump was first briefed in 2019 on the geological surveys of Greenland, his reaction was that of a classic real estate developer. He saw a vast undervalued property, the ultimate fixer-upper. The intelligence was breathtaking. Satellite imagery and core samples revealing veins of wealth that could redefine global markets. For a man who measured worth in square footage and brand value, this was the big one. His approach was, consequently, transactional. He would make an offer, a public, bold, and in his mind, generous offer to purchase Greenland from Denmark. The world laughed, diplomats cringed, but he was serious. In private meetings, he obsessed over the details, comparing it to the Louisiana Purchase, to the acquisition of Alaska. He saw not a nation of 56,000 people with a complex history and a hard-won autonomy, but an asset. When the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the idea absurd, Trump's response was telling. He didn't recalibrate, he retaliated. He canceled the state visit, took to Twitter, and turned a potential partnership into a public feud. He alienated the Danish government, and more fatally, he insulted the people of Greenland, who saw in his words the ghost of colonialism they had spent generations trying to escape. While this diplomatic circus played out on the world stage, a different kind of meeting was happening elsewhere. In Ottawa, a strategy was being formulated not in the halls of Parliament, but in the quiet offices of financiers and policy experts. The architect was Mark Carney, former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, a man who understands that global power in the 21st century is built on financial networks and trust, not just firepower. Carney and his team saw the opening Trump had created. They saw the resentment in Nuuk, the frustration in Copenhagen, and they saw an opportunity. The Canadian strategy was elegant in its simplicity. It began with a question American negotiators never thought to ask: what do you need? The answer from Greenlandic leaders was straightforward. They needed economic development that would provide jobs for their youth. They needed infrastructure, ports, schools, hospitals, that would grant them a true measure of independence from Danish subsidies. They needed a partner, not a patron. A shareholder, not a landlord. Canada became that partner. The deal with Greenland Resources Incorporated wasn't just a mining license, it was a blueprint for a new kind of diplomacy. It guaranteed local employment, built-in environmental safeguards, and crucially, a profit-sharing model that kept wealth in Greenland. They revived the stalled Nalunaq gold mine not as a foreign takeover, but as a joint venture, preserving Greenlandic sovereignty. Each contract, each handshake was a brick in a fortress of influence that Washington didn't even see being built. Denmark, relieved to have a responsible alternative to American bullying, gave its quiet blessing. European capital smelling stability and profit flowed into these Canadian-led ventures. By the time Trump left office in 2021, the door to Greenland's resources was already closing. When he returned to power in 2024, obsessed with securing what he saw as his legacy deal, he found it not just closed, but bolted shut. The scale of what Canada achieved is almost incomprehensible. Control over neodymium for magnets, graphite for anodes, niobium for superalloys, materials that are not just valuable, but essential for everything from the smartphone in your pocket to the stealth bomber in the sky. The estimated $50 trillion is one thing. The strategic leverage is another thing entirely. Canada now holds the keys to the supply chains of the future. The nation that controls these materials controls the pace of technological evolution. The implications are a slow-rolling earthquake for American security. Lockheed Martin finds its production lines for the F-35 threatened by a shortage of rare earth magnets, once sourced reliably, now subject to Canadian oversight. Raytheon's missile guidance systems are delayed. The Pentagon, in classified briefings, is facing a nightmare scenario. In a prolonged conflict, the United States may not be able to replenish its advanced weaponry because the raw materials are controlled by a friendly but firm gatekeeper. The final exquisite irony came when Trump, back in the Oval Office, renewed his pressure on Greenland. This time he was met not with polite refusal, but with a sovereign defiance that echoed around the world. Greenland's Prime Minister, Knut Borep stated calmly that Greenland was not and never would be for sale. And then the hammer fell. Denmark, in a move that stunned NATO, declared that any coercive action against Greenland would be considered an attack on Denmark itself, invoking the alliance's Article 5 collective defense clause. For the first time in history, the bedrock of the Western alliance was being used as a shield against its own leader. America was not just facing a diplomatic defeat, it was facing a constitutional crisis within its own security architecture. So while Washington drafts contingency plans for unthinkable scenarios, military interventions against a NATO ally, Canada continues its quiet work. There are no victory laps in Ottawa, no triumphant headlines, just the steady, methodical signing of contracts, the building of ports, the deepening of partnerships. They won the great Arctic resource war without a shot being fired because they understood the fundamental shift in power. In an interconnected world, respect is a more potent currency than force. Partnership is a stronger foundation than domination. America, the nation that believed its power was unassailable, has been left with empty docks and silent minds, a testament to a battle it was too distracted to even know it was fighting. The new gatekeeper of the North doesn't stand at a border with a rifle, it stands at a negotiating table with a contract, a pen, and the patience to listen.